record to the cloud. Okay, I'm going to share with you the PowerPoint that we've got there as well. So thanks, Matt. Yeah, as Matt said, I'm the founder and sort of director for the Association of SU Professionals. We've launched about 6 weeks ago, so we're very brand new, and we are very, very excited to be developing this organisation. There's a session tomorrow which is about the association and the potential of the association for the future. But I will go in a little bit about what the association is in a short while. We decided that, or we put this session together. We've already run it once for people who are interested as an ad hoc thing that we did a couple of weeks ago. And had some really, really interesting conversations. So hopefully we'll have some good conversations this afternoon. And for us, it's really about finding out where you're at and understanding what's going on for you and what the key considerations are. Because we find ourselves in a multitude of different situations with a multitude of experiences amongst our people. And I think, you know, whilst everybody's experiencing the sort of similar kind of issues, there are those things which are unique to our own organisations. Rachel, do you want to add anything more to that?
I'm just putting my phone on silent. No, I'm here. Scott and I did some work. Let me start that again. I did some work with some universities over the last couple of years, particularly around the leadership and management piece and employability for young people, and also helping different student unions in different universities, which is how Scott and I came to meet each other through a mutual contact of ours from Exeter. Some of you may know him, Geoff Cook, who I did some work with over the last 5 years. So that's kind of why I'm here, really, because it's something I've been involved in, and Scott and I had a conversation. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for student unions to become part of an association with all the fantastic ideas that Scott's got. So really pleased to be here. And I'm really keen to listen, actually, to some of the challenges that you might be facing.
Okay. Thank you. It'd be really helpful. I know people have typed in the chat about where they're from. It'd be really just interesting for us to get a little bit about where you're from and why you've come to this session, really, I guess. So maybe if we go to Jackie first, is that okay?
Hi. Right, I'm from the SU in Brighton, and I'm the HR director, so I'm having to deal with all the furlough stuff, coming back and forth and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I'd say
so quite time, right?
The biggest challenge is getting people not to work rather than coming back to work.
Right.
So we're just going into flexible work furlough from the 1st of August. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, actually getting them to come in for a week and then take a couple of weeks off again, maybe come in for another week. So I think that's going to be our biggest challenge there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jackie. How long will that flexible furlough be for you? Are you defining it just to August, or are you?
No, we've done it till the end of October,
Okay.
but probably with the aim of most people coming back mid to late September.
Yeah.
Kind of like full time, depending on obviously what the university does with regard to the students and all that kind of thing. So. Yeah. But no, I just decided I was just going to do a generic one that went all the way to the end of October, and then we'll just deal with the changes in between.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Claire.
Hi, I work at Coventry University Students' Union. I work in HR. So we don't have anyone on furlough at the moment, but I just thought it'd be interesting to join the webinar and see what's happening at the SUs.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. And I think that Liz is with Coventry. So it's just shadowing, I think, the session. And
he is, yeah.
Yeah, and so we've got the digital team as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through a little bit about the association first. So we'll go back to that in a moment. So the association, as I say, it's brand new. there's more of an in-depth session tomorrow, but we very much are formed from some consultations that we've done prior to launching the idea with people that I know throughout the students' union sector, and the challenge of professional development in the students' union sector. And I think there's a kind of a feeling that there's a lot of really good things going on, but they're happening in isolation and they're not linked up. And if I look around at other professional other professions, there are professional bodies that champion the work of their members, that talk about professional standards, that have core competencies, that talk about ethics, that talk about how we create the work that we do. And of course, for students' unions, that's multifaceted. We've got lots of professions that already exist within our space. So one of the key conundrums, and having HR people here is really interesting in that respect, because there is already several professional associations in terms of HR professionals as well, and also for finance people and health and safety people, communications people, welfare people, and so on. So how do we create a professional association for the students' union sector, for staff who work in it, even though they might have other professional associations that they look to as well? So that's a big challenge for us, but that's not about the session today, but one of the key facets that we're currently looking at. And as I say, it is very much about how we create the body of work that happens on the ground. And I think one of my reflections is that students' unions, their staff, our people are always focused on what is happening at the front end, what is going on, how are we making that impact, and therefore sometimes the stuff in the background can get overlooked on occasion. So that's why we're putting together the association. So I believe we're welcoming just one other person in, so it's Laura. Keep that there. So yeah, let's allow Laura to join us. Hello, Laura. Good afternoon.
Hi, Scott. How you doing? Sorry, I was the foolish one that didn't know to look at the other email to then work.
No worries. No worries. We've just done some introductions, really, Laura, so you haven't missed anything. And I've just been talking about the potential of the association and what we do with it. If you wouldn't mind, can I put you on the spot just to quickly say who you are and where you're from, and why you're here, really, in terms of this session?
Yes, so I'm Laura Greenwood-Pearson. I'm the Chief Exec at Brighton Students' Union. I think our Director of HR, Jackie, is on the same call, which we haven't planned out very well. But basically, we've furloughed about half our staff, so we're just want to get as many hints and tips as we can to make sure that they're integrated back into the team and it all works smoothly. Yeah,
excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're looking at the opportunity to network and meet other managers and issues, hear about the challenges and opportunities that you're facing, having a discussion around those things, and then we'll look at various specific focuses, which we tend to find is around mental health, well-being, support for managers, and support for staff. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about where people might be already, and what have been the major challenges so far about getting to this point for you? Because obviously we've been in this situation now for a good few months, and we're hurtling towards, and we've heard the next stage of furlough is upon us. How's it been? I'll just throw it open.
I'll happily go. I think from just my teams, I think the interesting thing has been that that both we have people that are, it's like the full spectrum of people, from those on the one side that desperately need furlough because they've got kids at home, there's no way that they can manage work and life at the same time, versus those other people that are hungry for work and worried about being on furlough, and just trying to manage that full expectation across the piece, really.
Excellent, thanks, Matt. And within your team, have you brought anybody back from furlough at this stage?
I suppose we were a little bit late on the furlough, and I found it really useful to learn from other people across the sector in probably ways that we could do it better, and that's well done for them for being pioneers. But we generally took the approach that we would ask every staff member to do 3 weeks, and that we would try and keep it equitable across the piece. But then in exactly the same regards, if people needed longer, or if we felt that we could furlough people for longer, then we would do that. Yeah, I feel bad because I've probably just taken that out of Claire's mouth in that. But I thought I would jump in early to kick off the conversation.
Claire, have you got anything you want to add?
No, that's fine what Matt said. And I was just going to say about everyone's different needs. So like some people with children, some people struggling with the routine, mental health, just a variety across the board. Definitely.
Because I suppose just to put some scenarios out there, because like I can bring, it's not just obviously the students' unions, I suppose I can bring some commercial aspect to it as well, and say, you know, that thinking about some scenarios where there were some teams who people in the teams felt resentful they weren't, or they were furloughed, so there was kind of a bit of that going on. Plans were being made when people were on furlough and they're having to come back into where plans have already been set. I mean, are those scenarios, I can see a couple of you nodding your head, those scenarios you recognise that these are kind of unseen challenges, because everybody's trying to be part of the team, but they can't help feeling a little bit, oh, that plan was already made before I came back, or, you know, those kind of things that are going on. And as you say, those people with children, I know that in a lot of teams that I've been working with, they've felt quite resentful that they either have or have not been supported, depending on their particular situation. It's been quite a crunchy old navigation to get through for you guys.
I think at Brighton, I don't think we had that problem. I think the ones who carried on working were really happy to carry on working, and those that were furloughed felt guilty that they weren't working. And as I said before, you know, trying to get them not to work was the most difficult thing for us. But I think for them, as far as like engagement is concerned, both Laura and myself, we actually phone each of our furlough staff every 3 weeks just to have a catch up with them. So we've kept them engaged, and I think that has kind of really helped the situation.
And Jackie, don't underestimate how best practice that is, because that is a trap that so many fell into, that they didn't do that. Because, you know, I don't know about you, but I actually don't know where the last 4 months have gone. It's just kind of, it's passed me by like a jumbo jet, and I'm not really sure how I'm here, and I'm supposed to be the expert, so I don't know how people navigated this in their businesses. But you're right, and I put it badly actually, Jackie, because that's what I meant, that people were on furlough feeling guilty about being on furlough, and actually wanting to work. And I think that's a common challenge, because there's the self-survival bit, isn't it, of I must try and keep my job, therefore even though I'm on furlough I must do some work so that people still think I'm valuable. There's kind of that emotional aspect of it, but there's also the other aspect of it where people genuinely do care. Absolutely. So they genuinely still want to be a part of it.
And every time we talk to them, the first question they ask is, oh, how is everyone? And it's kind of like, oh, bless them.
Yeah, I know. But you know, I don't think you should underestimate your every 3 week chat, because so many businesses didn't do that, and that they have stored up a host of issues that they're going to have to get the team back together again and rebuild the trust, actually.
Absolutely. I think that varies from manager to manager as well.
Yes. What are you thinking of, Claire?
And some managers have done that and regularly catch up with their staff, and then others haven't done that so much, and then that can cause a bit of resentment too.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And I'm going to say it's quite bold. I can say it to you because you guys know where I'm coming from. But that lack of consistency affects that organisational image, doesn't it? In terms of, oh, you got lucky because you had Claire as your boss, but I had someone else. I had Scott, and it just wasn't such a great experience.
I think, to be honest, it's kind of, maybe it's a control thing of mine, but I wasn't 100% sure that our managers would be saying what we wanted them to say.
Have you seen Laura? Laura's head's going to drop off in a minute if she nods any more vigorously.
I think that's true, actually, and that's one of the reasons that Jackie and I chose to do it rather than leaving it on some of the other managers. But I think one of my concerns with them coming back is we always struggle in their shoes to try and find the similarities and the commonalities between our membership teams and our commercial teams. And we have furloughed our commercial team and we haven't furloughed our membership team. And there's obviously really good reasons that everybody understands for that. But we've now got 4-5 months of proper stories, anecdotes to talk about for those that have still been working, that we will naturally talk about and share. And do you remember when? Wasn't it funny when? But equally, when we go back in September, we're probably going to have the reverse situation, that the commercial team will all be on site and a lot of the membership team won't. So it's how we make sure that divide, what we've done loads of work on over the last 3 years, how we don't push that divide anymore. So any top tips, welcome, please.
You know, it's really interesting, actually, Laura, what you talk about there, because one of the word I've used throughout the last 4 months is being explicit. And it's something we forget sometimes. But do you know what? I would sit the commercial team down, and that wonderful explanation you just gave me, I'd give it to them and just say, how can we make it work? And actually, when people have that explicit view and idea, they kind of go, oh yeah, I can see where you're coming from, Laura, excellent. And it's never as, do you know what I mean? And because we almost think because we should be the experts and we should have this nailed, we mustn't say that we're not sure what to do. But actually, right now, I think that is probably the best thing that you could do, is to say to the commercial team, you haven't been here for 4 or 5 months. I want to make sure there's no gap between the commercial team and the membership team. What can we do? What do you think?
Yeah.
And it just suddenly, it builds that trust back up again, that you trust them, that you're willing to empower them to come up with their own ideas, and that the membership team feel valued because you're saying it explicitly to the commercial team, is these guys have been amazing, and you know, they've kept the ship going, and aren't we lucky?
Yeah, good idea, thank you.
That's just, you know, that's the word I've probably used the most lately. I don't think that there's, I might write a book, but I don't think there's one out at the moment.
Well,
what shall I call it?
We've commented on this, that even if we wrote a book, we hope nobody will ever have to read it or use it again. We don't want to do this again, thank you.
That's partly one of the pitfalls of releasing our lessons from COVID document on Friday. Was that, you know, this is kind of history and a historical perspective that we hope will never come forward. I mean, one of my musings, I have to say, is that, you know, we as students' unions will have spent a lot of time or not in trustee boards talking about the risk management, crisis management kind of plan. And one of the things that has really struck me about some of those conversations I've been having with people is when this hit, nobody reached for that management plan. Everybody looked to the university or the people who are making the decisions and said, right, we've now got to respond and react. And I think that's most probably one of the key lessons for me, is moving forward in the future, is actually how much time have we spent at a governance level or even a management level doing all of this preparation for something that was, you know, we thought, yeah, it might happen, but we did it on the basis of, will there be a fire in the venue, or will there be, asbestos in the roof, or will there be, you know, a stoppage of water? A global pandemic was never in the plan, although it would have been on the risk matrix, but it would never have made us go to the shelf and pick off the document. or into the Outlook drive or whatever it is that we're using. So, somebody will tell me that they did that one day, and I'll be stumped for the response. But it does does make me think that there is a lesson here for us to remember what we're good at, and to really focus on the amount of stuff that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and trust in our people. Because our people do know what they're talking about. And actually, if we've got the right management frameworks, then we will bring people in and we will be able to solve problems collectively together. But that's, I'll be quiet now.
I was going to ask a question actually just on that is, one of the things that I've been asking quite a lot of my customers, my clients, people I've been working with is, what have you learned about your people in this time? Because I know we've been all really, really busy dealing with the pandemic, which has been horrific and awful and something that none of us have ever experienced. But I'm quite interested to know what we've learned about our people, about the ones that stepped up. Well, most of them I'm sure did step up, but what their capabilities are.
And what I'll do is I'll just remind you that we are recording the session.
Did I swear?
No, no, not at all. But I'm very conscious that, particularly for Laura, who joined us afterwards, you might not have got the thing that we're recording the session. So if you suddenly go into people,
oh yes,
we wouldn't put that bit up. We wouldn't put that
shout.
bit up,
Good shout.
Fortunately, we love all our staff, Scott, so no issues here.
Well saved, Laura. Well saved.
Now, genuinely, I've been massively impressed about how our staff have responded to this. I think they've been phenomenal, and we just can't lose that now. And Jackie and I have talked about this a lot, and I keep using the phrase back to better, because there are some bits we've done completely accidentally without any strategy, any guidebook, as you rightly said, Scott, that's happened and has been brilliant. And we can't just go back into the office and do the same thing again in the same way. And we can't lose where there might have been some siloed working. That's gone now. But we all had one particular project to work on, which was getting through COVID. So it's how we hang on to that and keep that bit going. So broadly, actually, I'm more impressed by the team than I was before, and that includes the ones on furlough actually, and how they've responded to it. Jackie's done all right as well. That's on record now, Jackie, because this has been recorded.
Recorded, yeah. But that's music to my ears, Laura, because that's exactly what I was searching for without kind of, feeding that to the group. Because you're right, this isn't about going back to how we were before, but interestingly, it's about spotting those staff that can be empowered with more responsibility, spotting those staff that maybe could work from home occasionally because they clearly get something out of it. But about, again, and I'm going to use that word, and I apologise a lot, I don't really, but explicitly saying to them, guys, we've just gone through something that nobody else has gone through. What have we learned from it? Because we need to write it down, because that needs to be our charter. That needs to be how we're going to move forward. Because I think, people keep saying, oh, how am I going to motivate everyone when they come back from furlough? And I think that's how we motivate them. Exactly right. Having you standing up and saying, do you know what? I'm so impressed by you. I'm going to work from home 3 days a week. In fact, I'm not going to work 3 days a week,
That's recorded as well, is it?
Yeah.
Good.
But, genuinely, and, joking aside, what we've seen people prove is that capability and that flexibility.
Yeah.
That, can you imagine if we'd thought about a change project that involved the things that we've done over the last 4 months? Can you imagine we'd be sitting in our offices with our head in our hands going, how are we going to get this through, everybody? Because they're going to kick off. Yeah. Not one word of it.
I think for us, yes, I'd say 99% of our staff have been absolutely fantastic. Well, no, 100% of our staff have been fantastic, but there have been the odd thing that we've had to address. And actually, we've addressed it better from being at home, which is a bit strange, but it's almost if we need to address this now. We can't leave it. We need to sort it out. So we've actually had to deal with all the normal things you do in everyday life, and it's worked out okay.
But isn't that the point, though, that when we're in an office and we see something, and I'm going to be a little bit negative now, let's say it's a performance management issue, our managers in the past potentially have the ability to kind of push that to one side and push that to one side and push that to one side in the hope that maybe one day it goes away. What we know is it doesn't go away. It just gets bigger, and that we're just allowing that to happen. Whereas in this particular period, not only was the spotlight on it, but we had to deal with it. And I'm quite interested in that particular topic, because the peer group managed that as well as the management team. Because if you were in a peer group and whatever the issue was, whatever the performance issue was, it was so starkly seen by everybody, you know, you couldn't ignore it, which is really interesting. And one of the things I always say to people is you don't lose the good people. You don't lose the people that are underperforming. You lose the good people because they get annoyed with you. I nearly said something else there, but remember we were being recorded. They get annoyed with you because that isn't dealt with, and that they end up picking up the slack, I suppose. So I don't know what your thoughts are about what that looks like going forward, because we've all got one or two. I'm not saying that there isn't, you know, every team will have one or two, but they're not malicious people that wake up every morning thinking, oh, I know, I'll go to work and annoy everybody. No. It just happens, they just find themselves in that situation. But as our job as managers is to deal with it. So what are your thoughts around that? Because Laura said, we need to go back to better. I think that was your expression.
I think it is the case of, you know, we try and not persuade, coerce, whatever words you want to use, that our managers do actually address these issues. So that we've just got to carry on. We can't let it go back to, as you say, sweeping under the carpet. It's got to be dealt with. If someone's not performing, you have to deal with it. And it just, the longer you leave it, it just makes it worse. And I think to a certain extent, working from home has highlighted some of these, but we've obviously had to be really careful because we also appreciate it's not normal circumstances. So we've had to play it really quite carefully how we actually dealt with it. But yeah, no, it's going back and actually doing your job. Do what you pay for. You're a manager. Be a manager and actually manage. And I think that's what kind of is important to me when we go back. Don't know what Laura might say, but
completely agree as always, Jackie.
Good.
Very wise. Claire, what do you think, Claire? What sort of things have you been listening to that have kind of applied to you?
Different from the rest of this group because I'm not actually a manager, so I'm probably not having the same situations.
This is good though. It gives us a different perspective.
Because then when managers come for advice, I can think about these things.
What do you think about what you're hearing about some of the challenges from your perspective? How does that work for you?
I haven't heard of any challenges like that where we are. I don't know about Matt.
Good one. You know, throw the hot potato to me as I was just do an email on something. No,
so I'm going to make Claire come back after you finish.
That's good. Thank you, thank you, Rachel. I'm glad we've got that both on file and recorded. I think you know, Scott would know, and probably Laura would know that certainly I feel gifted that I work with a great manager that all he believed in was trust. And this isn't an obituary or a kind of leaving speech for him, leaving the movement. But I do think it's kind of, it's not blind trust, but it is high trust. And, you know, that trust gets eroded. You know, it starts high and it gets eroded with certain people as they suppose let the organisation down, or perhaps don't manage that trust that they've been given in the right way. But overall, I think you know, the kind of organisational resilience and that has been built through the last 4 months has been incredible. And I think it's really testing managers in that space and coordinators to, you know, we often think about, like, you know, think about plan B. What's your option if it all doesn't go right? And everyone is planning for 50 million different scenarios. And I think I mean, if we could have made that as a staff development program 10 years ago, we all would have.
Can you imagine? I know.
All would have loved
Definitely.
it. And I think it's probably come with some casualties as well. But wholeheartedly, I think it's been pretty radical experience for everyone, in for culture, for those that have, I can't wait in 30 years' time to say, back in COVID when we had.
Remember when?
Yeah.
And
you're sitting in your chair saying you've got no idea.
Yeah, but I think they are the moments where you see the best in people, really. Now, I think the hardest thing is the return from furlough, particularly if people have been off for a long time.
Yeah,
it's quite a struggle to get back into it. I was lucky; I only had 3 weeks. But I do think that's a real challenge in getting people geared back up, but also making plans, but not making definitive plans as well, and that balance, and it's really hard for staff.
I think one of the things that, and we covered this in a previous session we did, I think, Rachel, is that, everyone's going to have their own story to tell. Everyone has their own experience of furlough, of COVID, and whether they've been at work or whether they've been off, or whether they've had to be there for dependents and family and so on. And it's about creating the right space and environment, an appropriate space and environment for those stories to be told. Because one of the key facets is, particularly for your staff, particularly those who have been furloughed and will be coming back, is that they most probably haven't had that kind of offloading to colleagues. Some may well feel as though they haven't been involved in the organisation, or been involved with people that they would sit and natter to over the photocopier and all that kind of stuff, for a couple of minutes a day and so on. So I think the personalisation, or the ability for people to share their COVID stories, I think is vital. And that's not about top trumping either, is it? So it's about that's the environmental factor, and making sure that people, if they want to share, they don't have to share, of course, but if they want to share and they feel able to share, then they have that time and space, because that's about bringing the team back together. And of course, it's a different team than the one that we had when we all went home back in end of February, beginning of March. And so we've got new officers. We've got some people who have left our organisations. We've got new casuals in the organisation as well. A different cohort of students, and a different, kind of programme mix, most probably, in terms of what's being delivered on campus, off campus, online, and so on. So again, just lots of different bits that are happening within the environment.
It's really interesting, Scott, because Jackie, you were saying, and Laura, you were saying as well, that and I think Claire, you mentioned that it's different for everybody, but some of your managers have been ringing, some of them haven't, so it kind of depended where you were. So there's been an environment for you, so if to show that you remember, that you understand, to talk personally to some people about some of their experiences, because we just don't know, because some people have not been touched by COVID in the sense of the sickness, the illness, at all, and others sadly have experienced, that the worst part of the illness. And I think being able to express that early on is really important, because Matt, you mentioned the word trust. And I work with Lencioni as a process, and it's in the handout actually that we've got on the SU site. But you mentioned about trust being eroded, but so the work version of trust is I will neither consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or accidentally take advantage of you. So as a manager, that's one hell of a one hell of a thing that you have to stand by. And you'll see kind of the role of the leader in that. And Claire, whether you're management or not, actually as being a team member, we all sign up to, you know, kind of this collective outcomes, confronting difficult issues, getting clarity and closure, mining for conflict in a positive way. And as a leader, you know, and a team member, so trust is knowing that when a team member does push you, they're doing it because they care about the team. So when people come back, I think it's that acknowledgement that it was really, really hard. But I love Laura's expression of back to better. I think that's a brilliant expression to grab hold of, because actually that's about the charter. And Claire, I am coming back to you, and I know you did hand that hot potato to Matt, and I'm aware that you do that now. So I'll prepare accordingly. But from your perspective, working in your team, what would it be like as and when that term starts and the team come back together again in a more, I'm going to use the word normal framework, to give people time to talk about their COVID stories? What do you think the benefit of that would be?
Within our team, we're looking at coming back in shifts. So I guess to start with, it'll be like a small mini team, and then at a later date coming back as a full team. But I think during COVID, we've probably got to know each other more on a personal level, because normally you wouldn't see inside each other's living rooms, see each other's children running around, that kind of thing. So that's been quite nice.
So that, and again, I think that's what Laura was talking about, wasn't she, when she was saying, you know, we've kind of connected on a deeper level, because, you know, I've had dogs and, you know, goodness knows what else kind of around. So you kind of get to understand what people are doing and how they're coping with that. And we kind of don't want to lose that. What do you think would work really well in your team? What would work well in terms of not losing that going forward?
Well, hopefully we won't, now that we've like formed those links and things like that, and you've got to know people on a different level. Hopefully that will continue. Yeah,
I like hope, but I know that it doesn't work. Bless you, and it doesn't work for me either. But how do we stop a year from now, right? Let's praise be, this thing goes right, and come some point in the next few months, we are able to return to our conventional work placements. How do we stop in a year's time going, oh, do you know, it was great during COVID because we all got to know each other really, really well, and we all connected so much better than we do now, and we've let life get in the way again. And I'm asking you, all of you actually, is what things could we put in place that ensures that we do keep that? Because that's what makes me slightly nervous for all of us, that we, myself included, I might add, that, you know, this is a 7-day-a-week girl who burnt the candle at both ends, worked absolutely incessantly, and then woke up in March and went, oh, actually, there must be a better way. But I wouldn't have done that as a consultant. I wouldn't necessarily have had that conversation with myself had this period not happened. And it would be really easy for me to go back to 7 days a week, 30,000 miles a year, on the road, out with my clients, saying yes to everything. I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I'm not picking on Claire, by the way. I'm asking all of us, how do we stop that not happening?
I guess we've all got to make that conscious effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots of stuff about leading from the top, isn't there? And you know, if we're displaying those poor work habits, Jackie, then other people might follow similar things. So we need to be aware of that. I think one of the things that I've got that I'm thinking about how we take forward is that shared goal.
Yeah.
And I know we have a shared mission statements as Students' Union, and we're all, in our case, trying to make student life better. We all have that we hang on to, but maybe that's not quite tangible enough. That's seen some of the results, like we've had to get through COVID, and we're doing it, and we're doing that as a team, and everybody's doing their little bits of it, but we've all had the same sort of short-term, really tangible way of dealing with that. So, you know, I've been talking about this with the new officers and what their targets are going to be, and And I've been thinking about how I expand that across the staff team of they're doing joint campaigns. We're stealing that totally from Essex, but they're doing sort of joint officer campaigns on two main issues, Black Lives Matter and COVID. And actually, should we be doing that as a whole staff team as well? So rather than individual department operating statements, which I'm pausing on and saying to managers, I do not expect a 12-month plan from you because it's not worth the paper it's written on at the moment, but I do want a first term plan. Actually, should I be saying to them, I don't want it from department by department, actually, how are you going to deal with this issue and how are you going to deal with this issue? Because they're our focus as an organisation.
Do you mean so they all work together on it?
Yeah, and again, some of this agile working that again other student unions are starting to do. So I'm not for a moment a groundbreaker here, but everybody's got their job to do, and that's not going to change. But if there are some central projects that cross departments work on, Portsmouth do this really, really well in some of their agile working, and whilst that's not wholly for me, I see some really good stuff about everybody working. And we've got a little Black Lives Matter group, for example, that will involve catering staff and voice staff and activity staff, as well as a couple of senior managers thrown in for good value. But, you know, maybe we should think more collectively about what we're all working on rather than just each department setting their own targets.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant, and probably similar kind of position to you. You know, in that position of kind of, I think, Laura, both for me and you, in our experience of working in smaller SUs, that happens more often because
Definitely.
When you need the troops, everyone kind of just gets behind it and goes. Whereas when you're in a slightly bigger SU, it's more of a challenge, and I've certainly noticed that at Coventry. So you know, how do we rally the troops around things? And I think it's probably about that operating plan being in a more issue-based thing rather than a department-based thing or a cause-based
like
thing.
that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a bit left field now, which as you get to know me, you'll get used to. But it's really interesting to me. I have a friend who is a cattle farmer, and would you believe he's called Phil Hurd? True story that. And he's got a cattle farm, and he also does riding holidays. And he's also a mountain rescue and fire and rescue for Dartmoor and the surrounding areas. And it really fascinates me because the whole of that operation of mountain rescue and fire is done on volunteers. So people that are signed up on call to do that. And these guys are spread all around the moor. So it's a big area. They're all around the moor. The call goes up. They could be in the pub. They could be out tending the cattle. They could be anywhere. But the moment the call goes up, it astounds me the minutes it takes for them to come together and go and deal with that emergency and go and deal with that fire. And the reason I'm saying this is because the one thing I've noticed is in all the organisations I've dealt with, not just the SUs, is that you've got these key people that have seemed to have rallied this. And I mean, you know, a lot of people, I think you were describing from the catering team, from this, that are able to be there. And I wonder if there's merit in having that as your business interruption plan, having this group of people that would immediately come together in whatever the situation was and be able to deal with whatever we've got. So that becomes part of their roles and responsibilities, and that conversation happens on an ongoing basis, so that, God forbid, if this happens, we are prepared because we're having that conversation. It's not like we woke up on the, I don't know, whenever it was, the 12th of March, and suddenly the world had gone mad. We would have these people, and I don't know the answer to it, but I work a lot with the Fire and Rescue Service in Dorset as well, and they work on part-time volunteers. And it astounds me because I think, well, actually, that would be a brilliant thing to have in any business. A really useful tool. So it's kind of out there as an idea. And Laura, you've started to articulate. I thought, yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. That's good. I will shut up now, sorry, without being left field.
No, I was going to say, I used to work for a conservation agency, so they had a very similar situation. And I think working for an SU, I'm not sure that level of urgency is quite the same.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that you could still have that interruption team.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't get quite the same if you would in like the situation you were talking about.
And I mean, you know, I'm thinking, I've been talking to somebody from a few universities actually about the international students, about the finances, about the impact of, you know, the longevity of this to universities is huge. And I don't underestimate, I think we'd be here all night if we sat here and looked at some of the impacts that would happen. But is there merit in maybe having that team thinking about an alternative to that, about what we could do, you know, helping people with that online situation where people can enroll online, about running the university differently. I don't think it has to be about a fire, let's say.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be about thinking about things differently, and that's where the better comes in. That are we equipped to deal with some of the curveballs that I think are going to come our way in the next 18 months, as far as our universities are concerned? Because for some it's about survival, and it's a very real threat. For others it's about keeping it ticking over, and for others it's about, are there different areas of growth? I don't know the answer, but I do know that we've proved actually in the last 4 months we have people with brains and capability to do a lot more maybe than they were previously. I mean, brain power wise.
What do you think it tells you in terms of the last 3 to 4 months, in terms of how you, I don't know, it's a bit of a leading question maybe, so you might not want to answer it, but in terms of how you set your organisation up? You know, we're quite traditional actually in many students' unions in terms of we have the leadership team, we have managers, we have departments, we have units, we have, you know, teams of people working per kind of what we most probably describe as, you know, traditional output service area. You know, what is there any learning from that in terms of how, you know, you take forward the challenge of, you know, your future organization really? Because some of the work, the kind of, do we do our team plans or do we do our issue-based plans, I think leads me to think that is there a different way of us constructing the workplace?
I don't know, because I think we have got such fundamentally different characters in many of our departments, and that's one of our general challenges, as I think, is bringing them all together. That we have finance people and chefs and advisors and, you know, lots of first work members of staff, you know, it's their first job. And I think blending all that mix is, you know, an interesting one, but actually gives us the fire in the belly every year because we get something different. But that's why I was sort of thinking in my mind of giving it a project, so they still have their little niches of people like them that understand them. And Matt, you're bang on with different sizes of organisations and unions on this, because small unions, we just get on and do it. But, you know, bigger unions, you have your little groups. And as soon as you get 2 or 3 other people that do the same job as you, you're all right and you feel safe and secure and you've got your little pack. But then when something like this happens, the pack has to work with other people. So that's why I'm thinking maybe, yeah, not shattering down what departments we have, but allowing them to keep doing the stuff they feel safe and confident in, but also drawing them together on a couple of projects to started. And yeah, if we talked about COVID-19 as a project, I think people would laugh, but essentially that's what it is. We've had to all get through this and get from lockdown to get to restart again, and then beyond restart. That is essentially a massive project that we're all working on in our own way. So yeah, it's just expanding that thought onto different streams of work for next year.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm probably not brave enough though, Scott. Ask somebody like Anna at Portsmouth and she'd radicalise the whole thing.
Are there any other perspectives on that? Is it just generally lots of nodding I saw really on those kinds of things?
Jackie might disagree because I haven't verbalised my philosophising.
No, I've been through that process before, where it was almost like where you try to not terrorise, that's the wrong word.
I don't know.
I can't say the word, but put it in territories so that you basically had. This is a horrible phrase, but like jack of all trade, master of none kind of thing. And it didn't quite work, but that was an intangible organisation. Whether it worked for us or not, I think Laura would know better than I probably would on that.
So that kind of generalist versus specialist kind of thing,
yeah. But I think the one thing that we could be looking at is our structure as far as things like hours and people working from home and those kind of things, because I think it's really proved that you can do it. You know, people can work from home, and some work better. You could do a mix of things, but you know, I think it's also proved that actually everyone thinks everything they do is just so important and it's got to get done. Actually, no. Does that really have to get done? No, we can leave that for a few months or whatever. And I think that's really been highlighted since all of this.
Yeah, definitely.
Apart from for me, of course.
I guess one of the things that we spoke about a little bit earlier, but also, you know, will be prevalent as people come back and we change to the various different working patterns that will be there, is around well-being and, you know, staff welfare and those kinds of things. I mean, from your perspective, from right at the beginning, right through to now, I mean, how do you think that has been generally for your teams of people? Have there been peaks and troughs? And, you know, and I guess I'm interested in terms of that, you know, those who have been at work and those then who have been on furlough, how have you known about whether those things, you know, whether you can put a sort of test or an assessment on that?
We did some pulse surveys at Brighton and were absolutely gobsmacked on how well everything scored. And then we did it about 7 weeks later, and the score was even higher, which was really surprising. And we're kind of due to do another one soon, which I've just realised. So it would be interesting to see what that one's like. But yeah, I mean, I haven't particularly seen many problems as far as like well-being is concerned. I think we've given the opportunity for people to speak out. Everyone has their little blips, like I did, because it was only one day and I had to work. But that's just what you kind of do, isn't it? It's but I haven't seen anybody, and maybe you can correct me, Laura, but I haven't seen anyone that's really struggled, apart from maybe one person, but they're actually, maybe one person.
I think it would just be the differences between team members a little bit. So we've got, when we're starting to talk about to all of the managers to openly talk to their teams about how they feel about returning and you know, whether they want to continue working remotely, whether they want to come back, what combination that might look like. We've had some teams who, for a couple of them, they'd be back tomorrow if they were able to come in. And we've had others that feel worried about going onto public transport and things like that.
Yeah.
And I guess it would also be navigating that people don't feel embarrassed if everybody else is going back, that they don't feel embarrassed sort of talking up. But I mean, we're trying to create an open environment that they can all talk to their managers and or us about that. But I mean, it's easy for us to say, isn't it? Oh, I'm so approachable, come and talk to me. But, you know, that's my opinion. It might not be shared by the rest of the staff.
Have you certainly, I've seen some organisations, not necessarily student unions, who have, you know, have necessarily a handful or maybe two handfuls of managers who are, you know, or people, team leaders who are trained to have these kinds of conversations. And, you know, you've always got your line manager there. But then you say, you know, you can speak to any one of us about these kinds of issues. Just raise your hand and come, because sometimes people don't, they feel more inclined to speak to different people based either on personality or, you know, the fact they may not even know them, you know, and they may not be familiar with that, but or they can see a bit of personal experience that they may have experienced somewhere else in their own life. I wonder if that's something which, you know, has been considered or could be considered in terms of, you know, thinking of coming back to work, planning for that. Here are the group of people that you can choose to speak to. You kind of have to watch, don't you, in terms of making sure that it's not just one person who's getting all the calls, but, you know, those kinds of approaches may be beneficial.
We
Can I ask?
certainly
Oh,
encourage
sorry.
it. Sorry, we certainly encourage it, but we don't. I think the one thing that we do need to kind of work on a little bit is a bit more training for our managers as far as like health and well-being is concerned, and that it may be that that's something that we can kind of move towards.
Yeah.
Mentally, how do you all feel personally about going back to the office, going back on public transport? Just, you know, just sort of bear in mind this is a safe environment, and you know, I'm keen to understand where you personally feel about this. And I mean, I'm quite happy to share with you my thoughts. Somebody's booked in that I'm going to a board meeting next Tuesday in Salisbury, and I put it in the diary, and I walked away from it and thought, oh, okay, I need to go and mix with people. Will I wear a mask? What will I do? And it just struck me that, you know, and I'm supposed to be the grown up, so but actually I'm a person too, and it just struck me. It made me very aware of how everybody around me might be feeling. I just wondered what you were feeling, really. Matt, what about you? What do you think about that?
Do you know what? I live in Loughborough, and I work in Coventry. And as much as I love the M1 and the M69, I have no dreams about ever going back into the office from a transport perspective. However, the reality is that I know that that's got to happen.
Yeah.
And I know that my wallet will take a hit on the fact that I have to spend a couple of £100 a month on fuel. And of course, I'll be damaging the environment, which, you know, means I'm not sleeping at night as well. So I think that, you know, I think the reality versus the preference is the key thing. And I think that's the challenge that I think we're all going to face, is this well-being conversation. And I use that in inverted commas, because I don't necessarily think it is kind of mental health or well-being in the kind of workplace responsibility viewpoint. But I think we might get that being thrown at organisations quite a lot on getting back to better, as Laura said. And I think, you know, I'm sure for people that have been on furlough for 3 months, you know, they probably don't really want to go back to work, but they probably also know that at some point they're going to have to go back to work, otherwise they're not going to be employed. So I think it's, you know, the preference versus the reality is a clear thing in my mind that as to what I've got. I don't work in a particularly structured way personally. I quite happily can sit till 3-4 o'clock in the morning working on documents, or, you know, preparing trustee papers or whatever I've had to do in my career, but that doesn't necessarily work for everyone else. And so like everything in life, it's a compromise, right? Isn't that the
yeah
I don't know.
What about you? I'm going to go to Claire next, actually. I was going to say, what do you think about all this?
I am clinically vulnerable, so I am anxious about returning to the office, but at the same time I do kind of want to see everybody's face.
Yeah, I worry that I've become slightly agoraphobic, as in, you know, I've gone to see my horse because apparently she can't give me COVID. So I've kind of been communing with my horse and people online. That's been my world. Yeah, it's just a strange concept, isn't it? So from your perspective, you know, are you going to be wearing masks at university, or what's the drill at the moment for you guys?
Decisions being taken tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's a big one, isn't it? Because
I think, you know, when I was talking to somebody about this earlier, everybody's craving somebody to just make a decision because, you know, Boris, bless him, isn't being the clearest.
Is he not? I hadn't
noticed I don't know whether
Laura.
You picked that up. Yeah. But he's not being the clearest, and he changes his mind a lot. So I think everybody's craving for just a decision on what it will be, and I suspect the university tomorrow will land on, and our students, that when we did a quick survey, have landed on, well, the students have said yes, we want to wear masks and we want to come back with masks. And some have said, I'm not happy about it, but I absolutely will. I understand why. There's one person that says they will not come back if they have to wear masks. So that's pretty sound. But I suspect the university will land on, we encourage you to wear masks, but you don't have to. And boringly operationally, that's difficult when we've got shops in the middle of admin buildings, but that's a boring operational issue.
That's classic
student
student
union. It's real though, isn't it?
Students' union, yeah.
As Claire said, how many of our people are, going to remain vulnerable because the virus hasn't gone away. So it's about containing the virus and doing the right things around that. And it's about how far you go and how we protect people. Because, one of the things that we have to accept is that whether we like it or not, every single one of us has been challenged in terms of our physiological safety more this year in our lifetime probably than we've ever been challenged. So that has a knock-on effect. And there are some that genuinely feel like that, and there are some that might perhaps push the envelope on that one, as Matt says, rather than spending that money up and down the motorway, they might push the envelope. And as an employer, like all of these things that become, and Jackie, you'll appreciate this, HRE, it becomes a bit of a minefield as to how you handle that with people and how you ensure that there's some genuine concerns and genuine things that you handle. I don't think that stuff's going to go away. I think Claire makes a really great point, because it ain't going away. And that come September, October, that's going to come at you like a train, really. Maybe that's your project, Laura.
Well, there's going to be a point, isn't there, probably with some staff, where we talk about doing it collaboratively, decision making, etc. And there's going to be a point where we have to tell a staff member, you're coming in, or
you're not.
Unfortunately, we're going down a different path.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm a chair of governors for a school. One of the things that we've had to endure, I would say, is that lack of leadership from government, and that that moment where they put the decision making in the power of the school or the local authority, which doesn't feel like absolving all responsibility and preparing the tool to say, well, you didn't follow the rules. So there's that. But one of the things we've had to do is risk assess every single member of staff and risk assess each active situation. So buildings, but also classrooms, also particular groups of children, particular situations that can occur, and to ensure that we can still deliver what we need to deliver, which is the education and development of our children. So I think that is something most probably that students' unions will need to look at in terms of where there are particular issues arising, is making sure there is bespoke risk assessments done for those situations, and then you build up your your ability to support that member of staff through that risk assessment, but you also ensure that the organisation is doing the things that it needs to do.
Have you had to do that, risk assess all of your staff? Is that something that's done in all the students' unions?
I think we're going to, aren't we, Jackie? Not necessarily fully risk assess, but we're sending out.
It's more a return to work kind of
Hmm.
kind of questionnaire that we're going to be sending out. So it's kind of like, number one, finding out how they're doing, but also what their concerns are and what we can do to help them get back in the profession.
But that's only obviously what they're prepared to tell us. The rest we're going to have to look at and monitor, and that's much harder to do when you don't see them constantly. In person, it's much harder to judge their well-being in that sense.
And things, I think some of them may well not tell us that they're vulnerable, just so that they can come back.
And one of the things you will have to do is make a decision about actually the information you already hold on record, and what is relevant to the risk assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's going to be trying to collaboratively make that decision with the staff member. But I think in some cases, we've got a staff member who has to be on site to do their job, but we're probably going to have a conversation with them about whether they should be on site or not.
and then, you know, what are the solutions to that particular scenario?
Yeah, and how far do our pockets go to say, don't worry, we know you can't do your job at home, but you can't be safe to be here, so you crack on even when furlough's finished.
Yeah,
that would be the tricky time.
yeah, very much so.
What's communication been like in terms of not just the furlough teams? I know that Jackie and Laura, you talked about the fact that you'd had that, and Claire, I think you said, you know, some did, some didn't, in terms of the people that were on furlough. But what's the communication been like? You mentioned that relationships, I think Claire, you said it's never been better in terms of knowing people and knowing personal things and understanding where they're coming from. One of the things that came out from our last one was about communication and about the fact that how often did we communicate, and actually the teams that were working were communicating daily. So they might have daily dispatches in the morning, they might have had, you know, regular conversations. And one of the things that came out of that is that actually we need to make sure that that continues, that we've realized we don't actually have to all be in a room to be able to have a good session of, you know, checking in, daily dispatches, say hi, and that trying to stop those silos happening again, you know, having a 5-minute team meeting actually was that's what we're going to do. You know, that's what a lot of organisations are saying is right. You know, we're going to carry on doing that. We're going to have our daily dispatches. We're going to be really neat about it. It's going to be 5 minutes, but we're all going to check in and, you know, Hill Street Blues, I'm showing my age there. You know, be careful out there and all that, and kind of having that conversation with each other. What do you think about that?
I think some of it is managing expectations, because there's a couple of staff that have said to us on furlough leave, they're like, wow, Laura, we've never spoken to you so much. and it's true.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they work in partner colleges 2 hours away from the central site, and there are 2 managers in between me and them, and it's not because I don't care, it's just we have a support system in place, and I can't be everywhere all the time talking to everybody and making sure everybody's all right every single second of the day. So I think some of it will be about managing the expectations of what frankly we can all consider we can manage to continue doing once we're all back into the same old routines, and I hope we'll up it, but we've got to be realistic about what actually we can continue doing, because so much of our work is on pause at the minute to deal with this, but it's not going to be forever. So yeah, I think it's about setting expectations.
And again, I fully encourage you to say all of what you've just said to all the team, because there's nothing more powerful than what you just said. You know, rather than trying to find some convoluted way as to why you can't, say I can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think, you know, we can all learn from that. So yeah, I think that, and people will respect that from there. But again, I think it's about learning the lessons. So for all of you have said things today from different perspectives, regardless of where you sit in the student union. And I think it's about making sure your voice is heard and ensuring that you're hearing what these guys are saying, because sometimes we can overlook that inadvertently and not maliciously, but sometimes we can overlook that for sure. But you're right, you can't be everywhere. No, even though I'm sure you try.
I actually love stand-up meetings. I've worked for a couple of companies that use that.
Yeah.
Daily stand-up, literally 5 minutes. You don't lean anywhere.
No.
I used to get told off for leaning against the table. No, stand up, Jackie. But I actually think they work. But when you are multi-sites, it's not so easy. So.
I've lived my whole career on it, Jackie, and actually I've been using video a long time, so it wasn't a new concept because I've always had multi-remote teams, but always getting them as much as possible. Yeah, it was a bit cranky in the old days, but yeah, and we did lose a lot of people in terms of frozen pictures, but you just can't beat it, and it's just that voice, it's just that repetitive voice of these shared goals aren't going to be any different tomorrow than they are today, and it's about making sure we just ensure that people are on board with that. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of the time, so it's coming up for 5:20. And I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Is there anything that you know, people are sort of thinking, I need to know this, or I need to say this, or I'm, you know, what about that, before we do end the session?
I've just got one thing, and it just keeps coming up. It's the, and I you know, having just come out of an events forum meeting where there were lots of people talking about nightclubs not being able to reopen and things like that. I think the importance in student unions seeing their responsibility for September is really clear, and needs to be really clear in delivering what we can, because I'm not sure things are ever going to go back to 2019. And so I think we have to encourage staff to diversify, find new opportunities. You know, that we got commercial people in a lot of areas that, you know, can probably think about other ways of doing activities. And I think that's really important for the survival of people's jobs, and for kind of the reputation of the organisation as well.
I think it's also used this experience to be a bit braver than we might normally be.
Yeah.
So like we're going cashless in commercial, for example. I mean, that would have taken lots of consultation, a few like, you know, polls and surveys of students and stuff. And it's just like, oh no, because of COVID, we're going cashless.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
blame it on COVID.
Yeah, basically, yeah, just being a little bit braver, maybe about decisions that don't need a full student cohort to vote on.
Yeah. And you did say, one of you said, and forgive me, I think it was Laura, but about the shared goals, which ties into your point, Matt, about actually maybe there's that conversation of who are we, who is the student union, and perhaps re-badging, relaunching, you know, and that's about being brave as well, is that you might think you know what a student union is, but actually do you? Let's that education piece about what you actually can do, and that diversification and those ideas. And as you've said yourself, there's loads out there. There's loads of different universities that have got some cracking ideas. You don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I just do what Matt does. Used to be what Scott does, but now Scott's going to put us all in one group to talk about it, aren't you, Scott?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And you'll all know what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Not too much expectation.
No, that's the session tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Look, thank you everybody for attending, and for such a lively and really interesting, I think, conversation. As Rachel said, we've got some resources on the website, and we'll send those around to you actually, or send it on to Matt, who can also put them on the SU Digital platform as well. I will just quickly share the screen. If you haven't seen what we launched on Friday, we worked with Cool Insight and a number of other partners to just record some lessons that student unions and our sector partners have observed in terms of lessons from COVID. That's on our website, has been since Friday. Rachel's got a section in there in terms of, you know, the feedback from this kind of session that we did first time round. So the Lencioni stuff is in here. And there are some other bits as well, including stuff from Atkinson HR, Greenhouse Consultancy, and Jan Sauer, and Aberystwyth with Westminster, Nick Smith in terms of trustee boards, and Trish McGrath at Aberystwyth, SU, and Josh Clare from Gloucester. So I think I got everybody in there. We've done that. In addition, we've also got this, which will be up on the website later as well, which is just an addendum really, in terms of the conversation around wellbeing and welfare, and some of our sort of recommended kind of approaches. And also there is the stuff that we talked about earlier, which is there, which is in the SU's piece, but is also separately on the website as well. Okay.
And we'll inform, just very, very quickly, we'll inform the kind of resource from the association and the kind of training and stuff like that, that the association can offer. I think that's worth pointing out as well. I think all of these things are going to inform that going forward. So lots of support that Scott's going to put in play there.
Yeah, we've announced the first 3 members of our advisory board today, and we've got an advisory board of 8 people that we're announcing over the next 2 weeks. That's on our website. If you want to know more about the association and what it potentially could be about, we've got a session tomorrow as part of this conference at 2:00. And on Wednesday, for your chief executives mainly, we've got a CEO's networking session as well. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you all for your contributions today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Matt, for organising the whole week.
Yeah. See how it goes. It's only day 1.
Hey, smashing it. You'll be fine.
So far, so good.
Yeah, you've done well. You've done well. Thanks for making me so welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Scott.
No worries. Thank you. I've now given you the host back, so
Cool.
you should be able to stop recording and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Next.